good day. Welcome back to the Constitution Line by Line. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier.
And we are talking about the Presidency, Article 2, and now we're ready for Section 2.
We're moving on.
We are the powers of the Presidency. In other words, we have a president established in the first section of this article.
And we know what he's swearing or affirming to.
That's right. And we know how to get him elected, even though that's going to change later on.
And we know we've had presidents that were disabled, but their family covered for them.
That's right.
We know all sorts of things about the presidency already.
One thing. What is the job of being the president?
What would you say you do here? Yeah.
We're paying you $400,000. What do we get out of it?
And we've gone a very long time on the powers of Congress.
Yes.
So now it's time to see what the chief executive will do.
So, the commander-in-chief, are you ready?
I am.
Just giving away what's going to happen. The president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into actual service of the United States. That's it.
First power they give him is you are the kahuna.
Right.
When it comes to the armed forces.
Right.
Including state militias that have been federalized.
Right.
Okay.
Now, remember that the very first section of the second article talks about the executive power. It
Correct.
just says the executive power shall be given to the president, but we don't know what that power is until we go here. And then
we're starting opening drawers here to see what this chest of drawer holds.
And very, very clearly, the first, and therefore I think it says a lot about where the framers were as they envisioned this country. Being commander-in-chief, being in charge of the military. And therefore that tells you that the defense of the country was something that was very much on their minds. Before anything else, you think about the preamble to the Constitution.
Yeah.
And it listed in a general idea what the country is about.
Yeah.
Defense of the country is right there at the top.
So this chief executive will be the shield and sword of the republic.
That's right. Now, of course, what this does is it creates a conflict in the Constitution already.
Yes, it does.
Because there was Article 1 with the legislative powers, and Congress has the power to declare war.
But once we declare war, this guy's the boss.
And what if we don't declare war?
This
guy's the boss.
Yeah, I guess he still is the boss.
So what we've got is this is the first time we've seen an example of the checks and balances, separation of powers concept here, where they divided political power between different groups of people and the president, and this sets up conflict. And that conflict continues to this day.
It's creative conflict.
It's creative conflict, but you wonder sometimes, was this deliberate on their parts? Mm-hmm. Or was this just an accidental? Yeah, we'll have the president as commander-in-chief.
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. And, of course, Congress will be the ones that declare war. And did they think through, well, that could mean that Congress won't agree with what the president's doing, or the president will work around Congress and not do what Congress wants him to do, and put our troops here and put our troops there.
Well, and, you know, this is going to come up during Reconstruction.
Okay.
And a couple of points to make. First of all, we're electing the commander-in-chief.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Through an electoral college system, so it's not some wild-eyed crazy beach bum from, Hawaii that's voting for him, but it's actually, sober and thoughtful people, your words. But we're electing the commander-in-chief just like the state militias elected their officers. Mm-hmm. So this is a very militia-esque move to make civilian control over the military.
Right, and that's an important point to make, that this is talking about civilian control.
Yeah, so we got two branches already that have a lot of control over the military. The military is going to have a hard time freelancing, is the point. But during Reconstruction, the subjugation of the Confederacy, the destruction of the Confederacy was done by force of arms. So oftentimes military commanders were the de facto political authority in a newly invaded, captured, liberated, conquered, whatever your prism is, they were the guys in charge. Mm-hmm. And so they ended up having to make rules and their boss is the president. So the local authority had to come up with, well, how do we reorganize and reconstruct civil authority in this region that is now under our jurisdiction? And there was no precedent for this. Mm-hmm. And so Lincoln said, well, I'm large and in charge, and my generals will be the guys that will reconstruct these areas. Congress said, oh, no.
Lincoln was dead.
Well, he was dead by the time we think of Reconstruction.
But Reconstruction started it.
Well, Reconstruction starts as soon as you have Union troops in a seceded region.
Okay.
And a lot of people try to push that Reconstruction timeline to the actual fall of the Confederacy, but the Confederacy was falling mm-hmm. all along. And so if you're in Nashville, and they're in Nashville very early, mm-hmm. all of a sudden you have to reestablish some sort of federal authority. What does that look like, and who has jurisdiction? So prior to this, it was a congressional question. So is a seceded state actually seceded, and what's its status once it's been conquered? Mm-hmm. Does it go back to a territorial status? Well, politically, you can't say it ever seceded. Lincoln never agreed that any state seceded. They're merely in rebellion. Mm-hmm. Well, there's an authority to suppress rebellion, and if he's commander-in-chief, mm-hmm. then he's going to call the shots. And politicians, especially those that hated Lincoln, mm-hmm. said, we don't want him calling the shots. We want to do this a different direction. And Lincoln tended to be a little more, let's get on with the business of the country. Mm-hmm. And some of the politicians in Congress said, no. They're not squealing enough. They haven't suffered enough. We haven't dismantled their political bloc enough.
Right.
And so that ends up becoming a huge conflict over what are the limits of the commander-in-chief. Just because the Army of the Gulf overruns Thibodeau doesn't mean the commanders of the Army of the Gulf get to call the shots, or does it?
Does it? And in fact, they did.
And they did. And they said, if you don't like it, do something about it. And that's when congressional Reconstruction essentially comes in and upends all the presidential Reconstruction. So it's divided into two phases.
So is there any limits then to presidential commander-in-chief powers?
Well, that's the question, is if something was brought about, a circumstance was brought about because you rolled tanks across a berm, mm-hmm. does that put it in the purview of the executive branch? Or does the legislative branch have something to say about it? Because they can certainly yank appropriations and things like that.
One of the things that I think underlies this whole thing is the willingness of people to exercise the powers that they might have. And you had with Lincoln a president who was willing to exercise those powers.
Yeah.
You see it today with President Trump, who's willing to exercise his powers.
Absolutely.
What we also see is a Congress unwilling
to exercise
his powers or unable.
Because of that congressional record thing. Because they'll have to go on record as having made a decision that they then have to defend. I'm amazed at all the politicians that voted to go into Iraq in a big way, that then backed up and said, well, I wasn't in my right mind, or I've changed my mind since then.
I was misled,
et cetera, et cetera. And, well, then you're either easily misled mm-hmm. or you were actually for something before you were against it, right. And that is what the congressmen are all looking at.
Right, and that will be an issue in the 2020 election. Joe Biden, of course, voted for the war in Iraq.
Sure.
And now his left wing of his party is opposed to it.
Yeah.
And so he has to defend a vote that he took back in 2003, 17 years ago, as well as other votes that he's taken in his life.
Absolutely.
And I think a lesson here is, as you look at the broader thing and the division between these two branches of government, is that you have to have a willingness to step up and step out and say, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Beg forgiveness rather than asking permission. Yes.
Yeah. And what we've seen, I would argue, over time, are presidents who are willing to do that.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen that same thing on the part of Congress.
Not since Reconstruction, I would offer,
yeah.
except during the New Deal. When FDR finally went too far, the Congress kind of back.
Yeah, but I mean, our President Donald Trump just this week issued another executive order in relation to China and the use of technology from China. And, you know, our executive orders allowed. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But where's Congress? I mean, what are the limits on presidential power?
Correct.
And so the Constitution created these conflicting systems. But you got to have a willingness to use the powers you have.
And we badly need a Congress that will stand up to the chief executive no matter who they may be, he or she.
Right.
And we need a Congress that'll do its job.
Right.
I think that's the only way this system works.
And clearly we've had presidents who are willing to test their powers, use their powers, see as far as they go. But I don't think we've seen that with Congress.
Well, and see, that's kind of taking us back to, you know, the 50s BCE in Rome. And with the Republic. And you had chief executives that just essentially tested to see how far they could go.
Yeah.
And the Senate kind of folded up. Now, they assassinated Julius Caesar, but after that, they became increasingly a rubber stamp for whatever Roman emperor there was. And these guys were more interested in their privileged position within Roman society than actually honoring the Roman constitution of their forebears.
Yeah.
And so that's
that's
dangerous.
And there could be the same thing taking place in the United States from a certain interpretation.
Sure.
I mean, we talk about an imperial presidency.
As one of my former colleagues said, I don't think the people that were alive during the collapse of the Republic and the rise of the empire knew the sort of bigger picture that was going on when it was going on.
Right.
And here we are. I mean, how much of this overarching picture can we fully grasp?
Right.
Where are we in the grand course of history?
Yeah, we have no idea what lies in front. We have seen what has taken place.
Correct.
Do we understand it?
Do we understand it? And if we don't take history in college, we probably don't. Only 17% of American colleges and universities require what we do.
What he does.
No. It's civic education. It's civic education. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, I agree. I deal all the time with students. Why am I here?
Yeah, why am I doing
Why
this?
do I have to take
all this
American
stupid government stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sorry. Head off to your business class. All right.
A business class where you deal with government taxes and government regulations.
That you just don't understand.
Yeah.
The roots of. Yeah. Okay.
So
that's our line.
That's our line. The Commander-in-Chief, we're going to get into more powers very quickly.
All right. That's our line. We'll be back with the next line next time. Thanks.